Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and today we complete episode 20 of our Rimworld Extreme Desert Challenge. In the last episode we dealt with a mechanoid cluster, a heatwave and a bit of a food shortage, and that food situation is actually what we're taking care of to start things off today. So let's jump right into the action here by launching a caravan. Red Hawk will be the one to go and she will be selling lizard skin and yes, thrumbo fur. From a value to weight ratio standpoint, that is one of the best trading goods we currently have. As you can see, we don't have much in terms of food to give her for the journey, so let's not slow her down any further and just give her a dose of herbal medicine and then send her on her way. Back in the base, meanwhile, we are now starting to work on something that we unlocked in the last episode, and that would be hydroponics. Now, unlike in our ice sheet playthrough, we don't actually have to place these around a sun lamp, which means our hydroponics farm will consume much less power, because we already have plenty of sunlight and comfortable growing temperatures. The only thing we have been missing up until this point is fertile soil. Now, while Edmo and Steak are constructing, we can give Troy something to do as well, and that would be to continue his research efforts with smithing. Now, this project itself does not really unlock a whole lot of things that we desperately need, but it enables the research path for machining, and that one will be much more useful. By the way, you may have noticed that our lights are currently turning on and off by themselves, because I finally installed the auto light switch mod. So wherever we have lights, those will now switch on automatically as soon as someone enters the room, which is of course something that we could also achieve manually, but that would be quite the hassle. In our hydroponics basins then we are going to plant rice. I don't think that comes as too much of a surprise. At the moment the primary thing we need is quick harvests to kind of counteract the extremely slow growing times of our other crops. And since building hydroponics basins costs quite a bit of steel, we will also have Steak deconstruct some chip chunks here, but down the line we will of course also have to do some smelting and mining. For now though, we can jump over to Red Hawk, who has reached her destination, and who can sell all of her trading goods in exchange for 420 units of pemmican. Now that sounds like a lot, but it will only keep our colonists fed for a couple of days, hopefully for long enough though until we have our first hydroponics harvest coming in. And while Red Hawk now begins her return trip, we can continue constructing in the base, this time by building a wall here that kind of separates our farming area from our defenses. Now, we still want to funnel our enemies through here, but we don't want to make it quite so easy for them to reach our power supplies and then also our hydroponics basins, so we are now splitting off the area where most of the fighting will take place. In the evening then we will also start constructing a slightly more comfortable seating arrangement, as we currently only have 3 stools for 4 colonists. Now, I actually don't think that we will upgrade our entire dining area to armchairs, but you can never have enough of those, and for the moment we sadly don't have enough wood for 4 dining chairs. With the sun slowly setting, Red Hawk then also makes it back to the colony in one piece, and so shortly after we can finally watch everyone go to work on a big pile of pemmican. At this point, I also want to mention very quickly that we are unfortunately not going to take on the Lost Refugees quest. Even if everything goes well and they don't betray us, that would still mean that we would have 2 more people to feed, and at least at the moment I don't think that is feasible. The armchair then actually turns out to be of excellent quality, so after Edmo has had a short night of sleep we can now do some rearrangements, because I think an armchair of that quality is absolutely perfect for our research bench, which is by far our most heavily used workstation. In the morning then we sadly have to notice that our ducks have also run out of food, but we will not launch another caravan just for them. They will simply have to hold out until the next batch of hay is ready to be harvested. Now, at this point, our search for steel continues. 3 measly hydroponics basins will hardly change anything about our current food situation, so let's have our colonists grab everything they can find on the map, in the hopes that we can then build a couple more. Now, basin number 4 is already up and running, and at this point we can also start smelting. There are actually a couple of these steel slag chunks nearby, so hauling them back and smelting them into steel seems a bit more convenient than mining out a steel vein that is much further away. Our cotton harvest is then up next, and that is pretty much all that happens for the rest of the day, so we can already jump ahead to the next morning. Edmo is once again busy smelting, and so we can now construct hydroponics basin number 5, which means slowly but steadily our food supply is improving. At this point, our hay grass is also ready to be harvested, so our ducks will no longer have to go hungry. And that is pretty much how the day passes by, with a whole lot of harvesting, and fortunately enough, without any unpleasant interruptions. And as you can see, hydroponics will be an absolute game changer out here in the desert. From seedling to harvest, a rice plant takes just over 2 days in one of our basins, so even if it costs some steel, we will for sure construct many more of these. The harvest also comes in at just the right time because our pemmican reserves have already run out again, but at least we can now make more meals. While Edmo gets on that, let us also accept the paid psychic suppression quest now, which, as a few of you correctly pointed out in the comments of the last episode, does not actually affect Red Hawk's mood, but much more so her consciousness. In that sense, the effects will actually be a bit more noticeable. Still, I think they're not too severe, and the tech print here is a worthwhile reward in my opinion, even though it is one that we will not be able to utilize anytime soon. Now, the suppression procedure starts immediately, and with that, Red Hawk's consciousness is now halved for 6.5 days. To make up for that, however, the reward is also delivered right away, so in the evening we can already have Troy use it to unlock the corresponding research. He also gains 2000 points in the intellectual skill, which brings him up to level 15. And as you can see here in the research tree, the project we just unlocked is actually one of the most advanced in the entire game, so I think it's safe to say that it will take some time until we get to it. At night then, we have a transport pod crash near our base, and well, this one is interesting to say the least. Now, the person inside it suffers from a disease that renders him unable to walk, and somehow he has decided to stay with our colony until he makes a full recovery. The much more interesting information, however, is displayed in the very last sentence here, because yes, you can't make this stuff up, this guy is Red Hawk's ex-lover. So our love games have potentially gained yet another player, and again it says here very explicitly that this guy will not leave until he's fully healed. We can see it here, however, this will take 32 days, so half an in-game year, during which he won't be able to do anything, apart of course from taking up space and eating our food. Now, of course, with the right skills and traits, all of that might still be worth it, but honestly, as good as the quick sleeper and jogger traits are, I'm just not seeing it. He does not really fill any sort of need we currently have, and again, taking on a 5th colonist at this point might be pretty risky, not to mention that there is a good chance he attempts to rekindle his relationship with Red Hawk, which of course is the last thing we want to see. So, I have spent some time thinking of a solution for this problem, and in the end I think it seems plausible that Edmo here would not appreciate the rivalry. So in the middle of the night he sneaks out to the crash site and, well, stabs the guy to death. Yes, I know, I promised you a bit more of a civilized series this time, but let's be honest here, this was just too perfect of an opportunity to pass up, and it very efficiently deals with what otherwise could have become a big problem. Before everyone else wakes up, Edmo then burns the corpse and our colony is none the wiser. That is, of course, apart from a very small mood penalty that everyone now receives, but in the grand scheme of things, this will not have much of an effect. And so, business around the colony now continues more or less as usual, with some plant work and some smelting, and also with the long-awaited rice harvest. We can now also put up 2 additional hydroponics basins, so we are already up to 7 now, and at this point I don't think we have to worry as much about our food supply. The evening is then spent with cooking, cleaning and resowing, until once again night sets across the desert and everyone heads off to bed. On the next morning we see more field work from Red Hawk, and then shortly after Troy finishes his research of smithing, which, like I said earlier, does not really unlock anything that we need right now, but it does allow us to research machining now, which we will do right away. Once we have that, we can then finally also disassemble the mechanoid corpses that have been lying in our storage room for quite some time now, and that will then also give us additional steel components and plasteel. Now, the next few hours here are not really all that exciting. Most of it is once again field work, until we decide to have Steak take a turn at the research bench while Troy makes another sculpture. It's not like we have a desperate need for one at the moment, but depending on its quality we might be able to use it to replace some of the flower pots in our bedrooms, which are on one hand an easy way to increase a room's beauty stat, but on the other hand also require constant maintenance. Our food situation meanwhile has stabilized, at least for the moment. As you can see, we currently have 15 meals on our shelf, and again our hydroponics basins are pumping out more rice at a very fast pace, so maybe 2 or 3 more of those and we should be fine. Down the line I do of course want to establish a steady meat supply as well. That way we can then either make pemmican or fine meals, the latter of which would actually be possible with eggs as well, but of course 3 ducks is not enough to sustain a steady supply. Unfortunately then, in the evening, first Edmo and then Red Hawk lose their shooting inspiration, and Red Hawk and Steak also lose the mood bonus from getting married. However, thanks to their nightly activities, their mood will very likely remain high for the foreseeable future. Troy's sculpture then unfortunately ends up only in poor quality. It is called The Force of Edmo, and you can read the description for yourself if you want to. Let me just say this much, it does not necessarily paint Edmo in the most favorable light. Now, I actually briefly thought about putting it in Edmo's bedroom, but I think the guy has suffered enough over the last few episodes, so instead let's put it up in our common throne dining room, that way everyone can have a good look at it. Now, on the next morning, we are first making a few more limestone blocks with Edmo here so that we don't run out of building materials. And then we're sending Red Hawk out to do some mining, because of course steel remains in short supply and our hydroponic ambitions are not quite satisfied just yet. Since the psychic suppression does cause Red Hawk to work a little slower though, we will also send Steak out to help with the task. He is normally not assigned to mining duties, but at the moment he does not have anything else to do. Now that situation changes relatively quickly, however, because here we have our first raid of the episode. And this looks to be a big one, 8 enemies, all with solid weaponry. There is even a guy with an incendiary launcher among them, so we need to be careful here to avoid our base getting burnt to the ground. So needless to say, we will have Red Hawk and Steak return to the base immediately, even though after delivering the first batch of steel, Steak heads back out right away, and just in that moment our enemies begin their attack. Now luckily Steak does make it back to the base before they arrive, and so we can now set up our defensive positions. In the enemy group there appear to be 3 guys who are rushing ahead, and that is always a bad idea, because we can now easily lure them into our traps. Two of them go down immediately, including the one holding the incendiary launcher, and that guy also dropped 9 units of medicine, so just like in the previous raid we obtained some very useful loot here. Steak meanwhile is already causing a bit of harm over on the other side, but of course we're not letting anyone into the base just yet. So eventually these 2 guys find their way back to where their 2 comrades died earlier, with Edmo and his thrombohorn already lying in wait, and with Red Hawk and Steak ready to pull their triggers at a moment's notice. And so it should come to no one's surprise that enemies number 3 and 4 do not survive for long, which means that half of our enemy forces have already been taken care of. In other words, one more kill and the remaining attackers should flee. Before they do that though, let's quickly bring the most precious items into safety here. With all the remaining enemies now coming at us, we should probably retreat anyway. Stake can then attempt to lure at least some of them into our traps up north, but it seems like the majority of them is already well engaged with our wooden door, and of course, as expected, that is not holding them back for long. So our enemies have breached the gate and this looks bad, but keep in mind we do need to kill only one more here, and Stake and Atmo should not have too much trouble doing that. Now, surprisingly enough, it does actually take 2 more kills to cause our enemies to flee, so maybe something got changed in that mechanic. In any case, it now leaves 2 panicked enemies right in front of us, and well, Stake and Atmo have worked together nicely so far, so I'm sure they will not let these 2 escape. And there we are, the entire 8-person raid has been neutralized. Atmo suffered a couple of minor injuries, but none of our enemies actually carried any dangerous melee weapons, so it's mostly just scratches and bruises, nothing that a quality round of treatment from Red Hawk can't take care of. Now, before he heads off to bed, we do want Stake to bring all the weapons back into the storage room, as there are actually a few high-quality guns among them, and it would be a shame to let those deteriorate. 2 of our enemies have actually also not been killed right away, but I had a look at their stats off screen and it was nothing spectacular. One of the 2 then died pretty quickly, but we can still strip the other one, which does provide us with some clothing items, including a flak jacket. So our first piece of armor, if you want to call it that, but due to its subpar heat insulation qualities, we will likely not make it part of anyone's permanent outfit. The next day is then mostly spent with cleaning up corpses, putting traps back up and doing repairs. In hindsight, it was a good thing that this raid interrupted us during a steel mining session, so that we now actually have the necessary materials to put our defenses back into place quickly. In the evening then, our base looks more or less like it did before the attack, still a bit bloody here and there, but, well, at this point our colonists should be used to that. And with that, I think we have reached a good point to make the cut in today's episode. Our biggest issue, food, seems to be taken care of for the moment. In my opinion, we should probably start working on our defenses next. Some gun turrets, for example, would be very helpful, I think. But of course, I'm also always open to hear your suggestions, so let me know in the comments what you think our colony needs the most. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if you did, then I would of course be very happy if you could leave a thumbs up. And if you like what I'm doing and want to support me and my channel further, then you can of course go ahead and subscribe, grab some merch over on shop.petecomplete.com, or check out and maybe even pledge to the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.